Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to our State of the Patriots event. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight. I'm Scott Thurston, Deputy Sports Editor of the Globe, and I'm pleased to be joined for the hour by three terrific colleagues, all of whom I'm sure you are quite familiar with. Jim McBride is our primary Patriots beat writer in the day-to-day eyes and ears in Foxborough. Ben Volen is our national football columnist. And columnist Tara Sullivan opines on everything, but previously covered the Giants in the NFL before joining the Globe in 2017. So with all that has transpired this season on and off the field with the league and here in New England, we have a lot to cover, and we'll try to hit as much of it as we can. We also received so many great questions, and we'll take the last 15 minutes or so to answer ones that we may not have addressed along the way. So let's get right into it. Jim, let me start with you. Obviously, the pandemic has totally changed the way we were able to cover training camp this year and the media's access to players. Give us a sense of what it was like at Gillette and how Belichick adapted his routine and preparation given the shortened time period.
Yeah, at first it was a real sense of relief that we were able to actually get down and cover, practices this year because the big fear was that we weren't going to be able to, and there was going to be kind of a pool reporter situation where there would only be one or two, and there wouldn't be enough eyes in the field. But they were able to accommodate us. There was two different levels of media access. One that had more field level access, and then there's a group that I was in with most of the beat writers where we kind of stayed off in the bleachers. We had to wear masks. It was definitely social distancing protocols in place, but at least we were down there. We got to, watch the practices, see what was going on. And it was kind of a unique situation where there were no fans in the stands. So we actually got to hear a lot more of the coaching that was going on and what could be, what they were actually telling the players. And, you could kind of get a more of a feel of a high school practice almost than a pro practice. Of course, it's against the rules to report what the coaches were actually saying or what they were teaching and the techniques, but it was still for, kind of background knowledge. It was good. So, the one-on-one relationship with the players, you weren't able to build that this summer because all media contact was through Zoom or video conferencing. Same with Coach Belichick and the rest of the staff. So it was tough to have any kind of one-on-one interviews or those kind of conversations where really you're not even digging for a story. You're just kind of, getting a guy's background for maybe a story later on down the line. So, we haven't been able to do that this year. So that's been a real drawback. But considering where we thought we were going to be in a couple of months ago, I'll take it.
And I'm sure Belichick doesn't mind that the rookies have been sheltered a little bit from having to do one-on-one interviews too.
Not at all. Not at all.
Tara, to you, what was the biggest challenge, during all of this, trying to tell stories, leading up to the draft, where there was no mini camp, there were no preseason games, all of that. It was quite different as a columnist.
Yeah, I mean, selfishly for me, it's really hard. Like my stock and trade, what I love about writing columns is the reporting part of it. I feel like those are the best informed columns when you get to interview people one-on-one. And like Jim was referring to, sometimes it's not just for the purpose of a quote, it's for getting the sense of somebody. You're writing about the comeback from an injury, and I can remember describing a scar, or something. You just miss out on a lot of that. But you just make the best of it. I mean, what choice do we have, right? So we are grateful for video conferencing and things like this. At least you do get to see facial expressions, and you still, the teams have been pretty proactive in including, especially media like myself, where you branch out to the columnist level. Like I'm not at anybody's site each day, so I've been relying heavily on the Zoom type stuff, and quite honestly, reading every inch of every story that all my Globe colleagues write, because you want to sort of, even more than ever, be aware of everything that's being said and being written in any sport, but in this case with the Patriots. But I miss it. I miss the
heading into the season. I mean, on game day, that's kind of how it's going to be for all of us.
Yeah, because like even in our case at the Globe, for people's interest, I mean, if a team is allowing one and then maybe two writers per outlet, I'm certainly going to defer then, to a beat writer and the NFL columnist to be on site. So yeah, I mean, you look for, sometimes, what it does. It challenges you to find the other source that's not the one that's on site with the team, right? You try to find an old high school coach or things we would have done before in the past anyway, but I think you're even more inclined sometimes to try to go down that road and maybe inform your columns and your stories in other ways.
Yeah, and as a former beat writer, that's where you have to rely too on a lot of your former contacts and sources that you built through the years.
Absolutely. And that whatever institutional knowledge you have, because sometimes in times like these, and we knew it through the pandemic, those are the fun stories, right? Going a little bit into the Wayback Machine or putting things in context and remembering things that happened in the past. There's some of the things we've maybe had a little more time to do. I wouldn't trade it. I'd rather go back to what we call quote unquote normal. But I do think as a staff, we've come up with a lot of creative ways to try to find stories in other ways.
Right. So Ben, to you, you've really been on top of how the NFL has prepared for what is, we know is sure to be a trying season. We know the Patriots won't be playing before fans, at least early on. And are you confident that the league has instilled the proper safety protocols to be able to get teams through the season?
I'm obviously very confident about the start of the season. They've handled the training camp and preseason remarkably well. I would say better than even they expected. The NFL released some more numbers today about COVID testing. A period, I believe it was August 29th to September 5th. So a 1 week period. They, again, had over 8,700 people they were testing, and 7 people tested positive for COVID, and only 1 was a player. So the social distancing protocols are working, the facility protocols, the daily testing. I think players have kind of gotten the message that this is not something to really mess around with, that they have to take it seriously. And when they're not at the facility, just kind of chill out and don't go to any clubs and restaurants and things of that nature. And, it's remarkable. The NFL, they finally, finished off their entire COVID protocol, and they combined it all into one document. It's 71 pages long. They had all these, medical experts, infectious disease experts, attorneys, the players union. Just they went over everything with a fine-tooth comb, and I think accounted for probably most realistic scenarios that would pop up. And it's a 71-page document. So I always come back to that when we're talking, not to get too off track, but like when we're talking about college football and high school football, if it takes the NFL, a $16 billion industry, and they have to do this 71-page document, the other leagues at the lower levels, are they really putting in that much time and effort into making sure that they can play as safely as possible through COVID? But I think the NFL has done a great job with creating flexibility with the roster rules, being able to put veterans on the practice squad. Injured reserve is now only a 3-week absence for a minimum stay. So it just gives these teams all this kind of flexibility. And like you look at Major League Baseball, a team has 1 positive test. They're calling off games. They have to shut the team down. That is not going to happen in the NFL. They've set up a really solid system here where players are tested every day. And if they do test positive, they're not allowed in the building. And the show kind of goes on until they can return. And frankly, the biggest challenge, I think, has been the false positives. There's that one day a couple weekends ago where 77 samples at a facility in Jersey came up positive, and they had to run some more confirmatory tests to ensure that these were in fact false positives. And, it was the case. And it just brought up the reality that players might have to miss a game because of a false positive. So I think the NFL, they were smart to where they landed here. They're actually not going to test players on Sunday. The last test you're going to take for a Sunday game is at Saturday at 8:30 in the morning. So if you do come up positive, then you have until 2 hours before game time the next day to take further tests and to test positive and to kind of prove that it was a false positive. So they've come up with a lot of different responses to this. It's been very impressive. And just following it from 30,000 feet, I think it's gone frankly better than anyone could have expected.
So they're going to test 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. And then if you test positive on a Saturday, you get tested again Sunday morning?
Well, any time you test positive, you get 2 more confirmatory tests to ensure that it's an actual positive, not just a random false positive. So,
but you have to sit out while they're doing those confirmatory tests, right?
Exactly. You're not allowed in the building while they're doing those confirmatory tests. So it could take 24 hours. They have these rapid point of care machines now, but they give you 2 types of tests to make sure. I mean, our country would be so lucky to have a system like this. They are really well funded and well heeled, and they have good technology, and it seems to be working well. So yes, while you're waiting for those confirmatory tests, you're not allowed in the building, but they're giving you up until 2 hours before kickoff to kind of get those negative tests and prove that you can play. So they're testing 6 days a week. And to counter the fact that they're not testing on Sundays, no one will be allowed in the facility on Monday or the day after the game. So, players usually go in for corrections and treatment. They won't be allowed in on Monday. They still have to take their test, but they won't be allowed in the facilities until Tuesday at the earliest. So that's kind of how they finessed the issue of the false positive while also trying not to let the virus in the facilities.
So the league's altering their schedule then too, because Tuesday is usually a player's day off.
And it still will be. But players will be allowed in for treatment. Whereas right now, you can only go there on Mondays for medical. Otherwise, your typical massages, your whirlpool, your film study, with your position coach, you go over the grades of the
right.
game. That's all being done virtually.
Scott, the Tuesday day off is by choice per team, because I can remember a stretch when Ben McAdoo was the coach for the Giants. He didn't do it that way. Like, as long as they get a day off, it doesn't have to be Tuesday.
Right.
But it just generally makes sense for it to be. It's funny. It's interesting to me, Ben, what you said about baseball, because as a columnist who's been following all the sports, I think whereas the NFL has clearly put in more time and has a better system, I think the issue we saw with player behavior in Major League Baseball was almost the most helpful thing instructionally for players in the NFL. I think they saw what could happen, right? Like, they saw when some baseball players weren't, as responsible or taking it as seriously about how transmissible the virus is. And so I think in some ways that served as a good object lesson for players in the NFL.
That's a great point. And to build off of that, actually, the NFL was smart. They included a punishment element in this too. And the NFLPA agreed to it because the NFLPA wants to get through the season too. So if players recklessly break the rules, the social distancing, and get COVID, and a team can prove it, they can go after a player's money and suspend him for conduct detrimental. And so there's a punishment element too for the NFL that I think was smart to ensure that, especially when a team, what happens when they're 2-10 and they, the season's over with. So, everyone still wants to make their money. So it was smart to do that. But, that said, it has worked well. But I think, also in training camp, the players have been too busy to go out and to do anything. Now that the regular season's here, they'll have a little more free time and they'll be a little more out in the real world. So I do think we will see more cases of COVID pop up, but it's been remarkable how no team really, there's currently like 4 players out of, 2,000 in the league that are on the list. So it's pretty remarkable right now.
I'm just thinking of Jim, though, even watching practice, like, you watch the NFL every day. If somebody gets it, it is going to be it's going to spread, because this is the most contact of all contact sports, right?
Yeah, even practice, there's a ton of contact. Even when it's not like full on contact, you're still some of those one-on-one drills. You're right in the guy's face, So yeah, there's a chance for it all. And I think speaking to Ben's point about the players, you talked to a lot of the Patriots about it this year, and to a man, they all talked about how they're not only counting on each other in the locker room, but they're counting on every player in the league to do the right thing because they all want to play. So it's not like you're just counting on those 80 guys that you're practicing with every day. There's 32 teams out there, and they want everyone to kind of be in lockstep with that message.
No doubt. And we put a lot on the players too. We say the players got to do it. The players got to do it. It's the coaches. It's the kitchen staff. It's the training staff. It's, obvious everyone has to be on board with this. And the last point I'll make is you asked me the confidence level, Scott. I'm confident they're going to play a Super Bowl. They're going to play a Super Bowl this year in Tampa. They're going to get the season in. I'm not entirely sure it's going to be 16 games. It might look a little strange. There's a little bit of buzz right now about going to a bubble format just for the playoffs, which I think would be pretty intriguing. They are going to they're going to get the Super Bowl in. They're going to finish the season. That is my big hot take for the night.
Well, it really is remarkable, the stat you gave earlier. They test over 2,600 players in that 1 week period, and there's one player that tests positive for not being in a bubble?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're living at home. with wives and kids and all that. They're in society right now, and no one's getting it. So they're doing the social distancing is working, the testing and quarantining and tracing is working, and the players are being smart about their decisions right now. So they're doing a great job.
Good. All right, let's get into the Patriots a little bit here. All right, so Brady goes to Tampa Bay.
What?
When did that happen?
Tom Brady's not here?
No,
wait.
and
Stop the presses.
We had that. We definitely had that. So that's been well chronicled. And so when it happens, all the attention turns to Jarrett Stidham, right? He's going to be the guy. Belichick's going to go with the rookie. And really after the draft, there was little excitement about the Patriots and really the NFL in general. And then June 28th, the news breaks that Cam Newton signs a 1-year incentive-laden deal. And that's like a shot in the arm for football fans and really was the biggest story other than Brady of the offseason. So, Tara, where were you? What was your initial reaction upon hearing the news that Cam Newton is
Where were we, Scott? We were all home, stuck in quarantine, sitting in the yard, barbecuing or something to that effect, but binging something, I'm sure, on Netflix. Honestly, I mean, my reaction was, yeah, they finally did it. You know, I mean, Ben and Jim were on that from the start. It always made the most sense. It always made sense. It always, I don't know, it just seemed like the experiment that needed to happen. So that was my reaction, was like, oh, they finally did it. And quite honestly, a little more excitement. I mean, nothing against Jarrett Stidham, but that doesn't bring quite the same level of intrigue or interest or star power or whatever ways you want to say it, you know, that a Cam Newton does. And I think I'm fast. I can't wait. I can't. It's one of the best storylines I think in the NFL this year. And yeah, I was just more of a not shocked or anything, but more like, okay, yes, they finally got done what was obviously needed to get done.
All right. Ben, did you see this coming?
Well, so I appreciate Tara giving me credit, but it's not deserved. I absolutely 100% did not think they would bite on this move. I mean, obviously it was something we talked about for a lot of the offseason. Cam Newton's out there. The Patriots don't seem to have a quarterback. I didn't think it'd be a scheme fit. I look at Cam Newton's career completion percentage, one season over 60%. And I looked at his injury history, and I just didn't think it'd be a great fit. Where I was wrong, and what I forgot once again is that Belichick doesn't necessarily care about that stuff. All he cares about is value. And he got Cam Newton on a minimum salary contract, 1-year prove-it deal. He got a hungry, motivated player. And if he's healthy, I think Cam Newton has the potential to be a top 10 type of quarterback. It's going to be very exciting to see how they adapt the offense to his skills, what Josh McDaniels can come up with. I think they're going to be relying a lot on running the football this year with their stable of 4 running backs, which looks like the strength of the offense right now. And then Cam himself, power runs, read options, third down scrambles inside the red zone. It's going to be very fascinating to go from a classic drop back passer like Tom Brady to one of the greatest rushing quarterbacks in NFL history in Cam Newton. And to me, the biggest question with Cam is he healthy? And I think time has been on his side in this. I think he's had enough time to heal his foot, enough time to heal his shoulder. The issue is, can he stay healthy for 16 games and can he take the hits? That's, something that he'll just have to prove, and none of us can know. But I think he's hungry and motivated, and I'm really excited to see what these guys can do.
Remember, this is a guy who's like 3 or 4 years removed from an MVP season too. It just was not that long ago where he was the dominant player in the league. And if like you say, if he can stay healthy, Jim, talk about his injury history a little bit. You were on this from the beginning. You did the story chronicling the shoulder surgery and the foot injury. Really, he couldn't push off the foot, couldn't throw properly. Can this guy stay healthy?
Yeah, that's the big question. I mean, that's going to be the caveat that dogs him all year is can he be healthy? But talked to a couple of surgeons, and he had two shoulder surgeries. His arm strength continually built during camp this year. You could see it. Even the layman could tell from his first camp practice to the last one. He wasn't throwing bullets, and then by the end of camp, he was throwing lasers. So I think there's the concerns about the shoulder aren't there as much, and I think that even goes back to last year. I think the shoulder was really near 100% last year, but then he hurt his foot. And it was against the Patriots in that preseason game, that Lisfranc injury. And then he tried to compensate, that, that alters your throwing motion when you can't step into the ball like you normally would. So that you could tell early on his balls were sailing in those first couple of games. I think it was against the Rams, and I forget who the other game was, but until they shut him down. But in looking at him, on the field, talking to some doctors that have also watched his film and seen his, his workout videos as much as you can take from them, they think he looks healthy. I'm not a doctor. I'm playing one tonight on this webinar, but I think he looks healthy. He claims to be healthy. So I don't think there'll be any limitations. I don't think they're going to go into the season saying, we can only run him 5 times a game. We can only let him throw 20 times a game. I think that if they didn't have the confidence that he was completely healthy and could run the gamut in that playbook, I don't think he'd be out there. So I think that's a good sign for Patriots fans and for Cam himself.
God, it's like 2 different questions though, right? It's like, one, is he healthy now? Like, is he healthy enough to play? And then the second part of it is, can he stay healthy? Because his recent history, has been beset by injuries. And the first question, it seems like, even from what Jim described, he seems to be in good shape. The second question, although it's fair to ask because of his recent history, it's also the same question that every single NFL team asks about its quarterback every single week. I mean, it is the overriding question for every team in the league. Can my quarterback stay healthy? So, is Cam maybe a little different, but he's not that different from anybody else in the league. So I think if they feel, that he looks good now, like what Jim described, to me, that's the bigger question. And I'm sure they're, feel confident about what he can do starting week 1.
Yeah, I don't think they have concerns about the previous injuries. I think they feel like he's completely recovered from them. And I think from talking to him, he feels like he's completely recovered from them. Now, quarterbacks are, their targets out there,
Yeah.
and he's more physical than other guys. And I can see him being the guy, inside the 2-yard line, it's on the goal line where the Patriots have had trouble punching it in the last few years. I can see them letting him do that. And that's, we all saw Pat Mahomes last year. He got hurt, on the goal line trying to rush the ball in. So a new injury, yeah, you're always worried about that. But I think they're confident that the previous injuries, he's recovered.
And he's a guy who, I remember looking up the stat one of the times that I wrote about him, where he went, Ben, you probably remember the stat better than I, but more than the equivalent of a full season without getting a pass interference or a roughing the passer call. Like, he's a guy, because of his unique skill set. Like, I think he's the best dual threat, RPO, whatever. I mean, I grew up watching, maybe I go to like Randall Cunningham or some of the guys even before it became back in vogue. I just think he's so impressive in both facets of the game, but he doesn't always get the calls because even when he's dropping back, sometimes he still looks like a runner, I think, sometimes. And so it'll be interesting. I'm fascinated by that aspect too. How will he get calls, or how will the protections go? How will he be treated by officials? I think that's going to be part of it for New England this year.
Yeah, because some of those defensive ends that were crashing into him were smaller than him. And
Right.
that creates, a weird dynamic for the referee. He's like, how could this be roughing the passer? The guy's smaller than him, so he didn't get a lot of those calls that he probably should have earlier in his career.
And his complaint, like, he's made it known, but and I like the way he put it, that his complaint is not when he's a runner. Like, he always said, once I'm a runner, I'm fair game. I get that. It's more when I'm in the pocket that I should, that I should be protected, just like the way that Tom Brady was. I should be protected in that same way. So it's just, for me anyway, I think that's one of the interesting subplots to watch when the season starts.
You don't realize how big this guy is, too. I mean, really, he's,
Jim, what does he look like on the practice field?
It's funny, the first practice he walked up the field, they were just in their shells and, sweatpants, and he looked like he was in full pads. He's just gigantic, walking, next to some of those other guys. The Patriots have a running back on their roster this year who's 5'5", and when he stood next to Cam, it was like, bring your son to work day.
So we got a lot of questions on this too. So I might as well throw it out there now. Could Belichick be looking beyond just this season with Cam, or is he clearly a one and done, playing for his next contract, and they're not going to take the cap hit next year?
Well, I think that, if he excels, certainly, they would be open to extending him middle of the season. Whether Cam would be or not, maybe Cam wants another big payday, but I don't think that they're walking into it saying, we'll only have him for this year, let's make this work and we'll move on next year. If it's working really well, they're going to want to keep this guy.
Agreed, except, if it works really well, I mean, Newton's going to be looking at a payday. Like Ryan Tannehill just got 3 years and $91 million guaranteed. So, I mean, that's a best case scenario for Newton, but that's, you know, what you're looking at if you're the Patriots. If you go 11-5 and you make the second round of the playoffs or whatever, I mean, you're probably going to want to keep him, but he's out there for his next big contract and he wants to be a franchise quarterback. So that's going to be tricky. And, you know, they're going to try to sign him early. They do have exclusive negotiating rights with Newton until next March, and they can franchise tag him. So they have control over Cam. But I do wonder if all of the positive things that Belichick's been saying recently about Cam Newton, he's been just, you know, overflowing with praise for Cam, which is fairly unusual for someone who's never played a snap yet for the Patriots. I do wonder if Belichick is maybe softening up Cam a little bit and trying to get Cam to really, really love the Patriot way and love how they do things in Foxborough, so that when they do come to him with a bit of a lesser contract offer, that Cam would be, you know what, I love it here and let's do it. Let's sign up for 3 more years.
Yeah, it would definitely have to be a deal that works, you know, both ways and that both parties were happy with. But to the question, I don't think they're going in saying one and done and we're getting another quarterback next year. I think that they would, you know, they're open to all possibilities.
And so if we talk about the shiny new toy for Josh McDaniels and they changed their scheme, how, you know, design plays just for Cam, or how does this switch in offensive philosophy affect Stidham? Do you see his development being stunted at all?
I mean, it might be, but I don't think that should be a priority for the Patriots at all. I mean, Jarrett Stidham is a 4th-round pick and a second-year kid, and he is getting the opportunity, and it's up to him to make the most of it. And I don't think they're changing the scheme so much that it would be a completely different, you know, game of football when Stidham's in there. He's a decent enough athlete. They might not be calling designed, you know, read option plays for him, but they'll bootleg him out of the pocket, throw on the run, you know, that type of thing. And I don't think it's going to be major changes with Cam Newton. I think it's going to be run-pass balance. He played with a fullback a lot in Carolina. Mike Tolbert for several years was a Pro Bowler there. And the running backs, you know, there's D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart there and Cam Newton. They were really a run-based attack, a lot of play-action pass. And you saw a lot of that with Brady too. So, you know, the different elements will be more bootlegs and more designed runs for Cam. But I think overall the scheme isn't going to look that different. And, you know, if it hurts Jarrett Stidham's development, then so be it. I mean, he's just along for the ride. He shouldn't be their priority.
Jim, so there are 6 off-season opt-outs because of the pandemic on the Patriots, I believe. You know, specifically and most notably Donta Hightower and Patrick Chung. How will that affect the defense? And what about Marcus Cannon, the loss of Cannon on the offensive line? How does that affect the team?
Yeah, they're big losses. No question. Hightower and Chung are big losses because the Patriots had already suffered huge losses at the second level with Van Noy going to Miami, Roberts going to Miami, Collins to Detroit. I mean, they were thin at linebacker, and then for Hightower to opt out, that's a big difference, and that's a big deal. And you know, Jawan Bentley is now the senior statesman as the linebacker, and he's going to be the guy that wears the green dot. And it's a lot of responsibility for a guy who didn't play a lot of snaps last year, even though he was healthy. And I think he was valued, but the fact that they had that depth in front of him, you know, kind of kept him on the bench a lot. Now he's grown into a larger role. And I think, you know, he's had a really good camp. He was just named a captain. I think he's a guy that even though he was young, a lot of people looked up to. But, you know, and then Chung leaving, he's really, you know, I always say this about Patrick Chung, how underrated I always thought he was. Even when people were singing his praises, I never thought they realized just how valuable he was to this defense and how many different things he was asked to do and asked to do well. You know, you talk to McCourty, and he was always like, they were amazed at what Chung could do. Coach Belichick himself would say the same thing about Chung. You know, they could put him in any situation and he thrived. So he'll be missed. Now, Kyle Duggar's an exciting rookie, and I think he's going to end up taking a lot of those snaps because he's a kid that looks like he can play, you know, free and strong safety, kind of that hybrid linebacker spot. But, you know, they're going to miss Chung. And this was the best defense in the league last year, at least statistically. And they lost 2 of their guys that played a lot of snaps, 2 leaders. So, yeah, it's going to hurt them.
Yeah,
Scotty, I got a story up on bostonglobe.com right now real quick about the kind of previewing the defense.
Ben Volen wrote that. That's right.
That's right. Between Chung and Duron Harmon, Hightower, Collins, and Van Noy, that's 33% of the team snaps last year that they had lost. So, and they didn't go out really in free agency other than like Adrian Phillips. They didn't replace these guys with veterans. It's now younger players, rookies, and second-year guys are going to be stepping in and filling these roles. You lost a third of your snaps from last year. Number one defense. So it's a very different defense right now for the Patriots.
You know, I'll say another guy that kind of doesn't get mentioned in all this too is Danny Shelton. I mean, he probably had the best season of his career last year playing, tackle for the Patriots, and he signed a free agent deal, I think, with the Lions. And they were really counting on Bo Allen to come in and kind of play that tackle spot next to the Lawrence guy. And he hasn't been in camp at all, and now he's on injury reserve. So, a rookie like Byron Cowher is probably going to end up in that spot, but that hurts them too on the front line of the defense.
To me, you look at the linebacking situation though, and they're going to be dependent on Josh Uche and Bentley carrying a big load, and the kid from Alabama, Jennings. This is the thinnest I can remember this linebacking core being.
I'd say they're certainly starting over. I mean, Jennings and Uche could be solid players, but Belichick usually doesn't like giving major reps to rookies. I remember even Jamie Collins kind of was really just in a reserve sub role his rookie year. Hightower took him a couple years to really become an impact player on the defense. So they have like Brandon Copeland, Shalik Calhoun, these kind of special teams veterans types. Maybe they'll get some more run. But I just think they're going to be counting more on rookies than Belichick usually likes to do.
Yeah, and I think watching practice every day, they really used Uche and Jennings in a lot of different spots. And, Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick talked today about the flexibility that those guys offer. And it was evident in practice that they wanted to move them around. And, I think that when you go back and look at Hightower and Collins and their kind of stunted growth early on, that's because they had established players in front of them and they couldn't get on the field because of that. That's not going to be the case this year. So I think that they are going to lean on rookies more than they ever have, or more than they have certainly in the last half dozen years.
I think this is an important year for Chase Winovich too in his development. This is the guy you need to count on now.
Yeah, I thought he was.
This year, though, I think every team is going to be testing its depth in ways we haven't seen, right? Because of who knows with coronavirus, coming back around to the pandemic, if that changes things. So, and the fact that guys may not be in quite the game shape that they have been in years past without having played preseason games or whatever. So maybe it makes it worse, harder for the Patriots because it's young guys in depth, but maybe everybody's going to be in a little bit of a similar boat, even with their bringing veterans back.
Yeah, I could see Winovich, to your point, Scotty, that, them kind of expanding his role this year and maybe playing more in a Van Noy type of role. I'm not comparing the two because, obviously Winovich is only in his second year, but kind of that same role where he can, stay on the field for 3 downs rather than last year he was just kind of a third down pass rushing specialist. So I think his role will be expanded too.
So Tara, with Hightower and Chung, not just on the field for what they brought defensively, but their presence in the locker room too. Two really respected veterans. The McCourty brothers very well, Devin and Jason. How valuable are those guys now, along with Matthew Slater, for some locker room leadership?
Yeah, I was going to mention Slater as the other guy. It's right. Ben mentioned all the heaps of praise that we've heard from Bill on Cam Newton, which might have an ulterior motive. The only one that comes close, right, is Devin. I mean, how does Bill Belichick talk about Devin McCourty? I think we've all heard it going back across Super Bowls, and the way he relies on Devin, not just for what he does on the field, but what he does in terms of the example of leadership. And obviously with Jason being here now as well for a few years and Jason being elected as a captain this year too, I think speaks to the respect that they do have in the locker room. And this year in particular, they're really looking to each other. Ben said it extends throughout the whole league, but it starts in their own locker rooms. What behaviors are we going to model, and how are we going to stay focused on what it is we're doing, and how are we going to maintain, what we sometimes jokingly call the Patriot way, but there is such a thing, right? It's an attitude that's handed from veteran to rookie, and it's a lot of that do your job and next game up and next man up. And it's not that other teams don't try to do the same thing. It's just taken such root and such hold in New England, and it's been supported by the results. So you're more willing to follow it. And I just think the presence of Jason and Devin McCourty, Matt Slater, the presence of those types of just of people in general and the behaviors they model, I do think that's even more valuable than ever this year.
Yeah, and those three guys were, especially Devin and Matthew, those guys have been the guys that people have looked to in that locker room for years now. You think about McCourty's going into his 11th year, and he's been a captain for 10 of those 11 years. Slater, 10 years, he's been in the league a dozen years. So they've always been kind of that lighthouse, that guiding light in that locker room. And now more than ever, guys will be looking to them for leadership.
Because if a young kid is maybe does the wrong thing, whatever, they're going to listen. If Jason says, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that, they're just those voices that they're going to listen to. Jason, Devin, Matt, those guys. I think Jason McCourty benefits. It's interesting to me because I have known them for a long time, and Jason was always the more sort of demonstrably outspoken, a little bit more dynamic personality-wise. But because Devin has spent his whole career in New England, he's got that seniority in there. But it really, they are equally passionate, talkative, lead by example. They're just so very, very similar that way. So, Belichick must love it. If he loves having one McCourty, the only thing better is having two. So he's delighted to have them in his locker room.
And how does Ben? How does Newton fit in that locker room for leadership? How was he regarded in Carolina?
In Carolina, I think the thing you kept hearing from players was like Cam, his reality does not meet his perception. That he was always a much cooler guy than he got credit for, and he wears the crazy outfits and the hats, and he kind of looks pretty flashy, hangs out with celebrities, but that. All the players seem to say, like I talked to Roman Harper at length a few weeks ago, and Roman Harper knew Cam from playing against him first with the Saints, then joined him for 2 years in Carolina. And Roman Harper was like, when I went to Carolina, I thought I was going to hate Cam Newton because I heard the same things that everyone else did, that he's a me guy and he's flashy and this and that. And he's like, and Cam was really cool. He's all about the team. He's a down-to-earth guy. He's really, about just his family and hanging out with his tight circle and doing his own thing. And he always – gave really good gifts to the guys in the locker room. It was just like a really and another thing you heard is that he was always a good hard worker. Like he really was one of the hardest workers on the team. And that is the one thing that Belichick and Josh McDaniels and everyone has said throughout, that Cam has really been a hard worker and really put in the time here during training camp. And then you see how everyone gravitates towards him. I've been out there just a few times, but you hear him all throughout practice. He's dancing, he's screaming, and he's, encouraging teammates and calling out their nicknames. He's just a very boisterous kind of guy, but he's been elected captain already. He won the starting quarterback job. He brings some flash, some star power to the Patriots. The players all seem to love him, and the coaching staff seems to love him. So it's been a good fit so far.
I think it was interesting that he almost seemed humble by being named the starter and being named the captain. It wasn't like one of these like, well, what do you expect? I'm Cam Newton. It was like he genuinely sounded when we talked to him after those happened that he was, he was humbled and not surprised. I won't say surprised, but appreciative.
And to use the expression that he used in that same interview, I think, Jim, which was, I have an opportunity to prove myself again. Clearly he's chosen, he knows what his motivations are too. And I think they create a positivity around him. He's not here like with any kind of angry edge. It's more like, I'm blessed to have another opportunity. And, to me, I think, Scotty, when you think back to some of the demonstrative celebrations and the dabbing, things like that, it's one of those things that if he's your hometown guy, you love him, right? But the rest across the league, I think other people, it's so much easier to say, oh, it's too much, or what does he want, or whatever. Well, the guy has an MVP and he's been to a Super Bowl. And if he to me, like, he got some maybe unfair things hung on him just because he would celebrate or do things a little bit more demonstrably. But I don't know. I like his energy. I always did as a player, even when I covered him in a Super Bowl, that he did end up losing. I didn't love it after the game when he was surly at the post-game podium, but, what are you going to do? I mean, he was, nobody's really good at the losing podium, so.
Well, I just want to remind people too, as we're going along here, use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen if you have questions for us, something that we haven't gotten to yet. We're kind of trying to power through a lot here. So, but if you have something that you want us to talk about, just use the box at the bottom and we'll get the message. I want to turn to the other side of the ball now, though. Ben, you wrote about the offense in today's Globe, and saying that it looks quite similar to last year's, which by Patriots standards wasn't very good. They finished 15th in the NFL. The wide receiver position is basically the same. What's going to happen offensively this year?
Yeah, like I said, it's going to be, I think, run-based. Because you look at the strength of this offense right now, it's the running backs with Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead, James White, Damian Harris, assuming he comes back in a few weeks. Their offensive line, assuming David Andrews is back to his former self, you should be pretty solid on the offensive line. And I think on the outside, you just don't have many guys who can create separation. I'm still high on N'Keal Harry. Jim mentioned before that Cam Newton, when he's in sweats, he looks like he's in pads. N'Keal Harry is the same thing. He's just a physical beast out there. And to me, the thing with him is, can he just – he's such a physical player. It seemed like he's always getting banged up and nicked up at practice and, coming off the field every couple of days. Can he maybe play within himself a little bit? But he's such a physical talent. So I'd like to see him step up this year. But they don't really have guys on the outside who can really create separation. So I think they're going to have to run the ball and do a lot of play action and, a lot of screen passes and getting James White involved out of the backfield. But it's going to have to be a lot of balance. You don't want Cam Newton dropping back to pass 45 times a game. I don't think that's not his style, and that's not what's going to be successful for the Patriots. But I think the first 8 years of Newton, the Panthers were always in the top 10 in number of rushing plays called. So I think once again you'll see a heavy dose of Sony Michel and maybe some more Damian Harris and a sprinkling of Rex Burkhead and a lot of play action passing to help create some space and give Cam Newton some time to make the throws.
Jim, you were down there this year, and there was a lot of buzz about how good Damian Harris had looked before the injury. What were your impressions of Harris?
Yeah, I thought he really kind of seized the first week and a half of practice before Sony got there. He looked sharp. He looked faster than he did last year from my memory anyway. That's when we really got to see him last year, was during camp and preseason, because he was kind of buried on the depth chart. Kind of a freak injury Sunday at practice. It was a non-contact, practice. So I don't exactly know what happened. I just saw the aftermath of it. I don't know whether he got his hand jammed on a pass during an individual drill, or he took a handoff and he got jammed, but he looked really good. He just hasn't been able to catch a break in 2 years because he was buried on the depth chart last year, and this year he's hurt. So, but I agree with Ben. I think they're going to be a running team. I think you're going to see a lot of Jakob Johnson, guy that people don't really know about, but he's kind of filled in the fullback role. And I think Dalton Keene will be used kind of as an H-back. He's one of the young tight ends. He's a good blocker. Devin Asiasi's a good blocker. So this could be kind of a ground and pound team.
So Mohamed Sanu's release was a huge pill for Belichick to swallow. I mean, they gave up a second-round pick for this guy who contributed minimally. And I'm concerned about the receiving situation. I know they do save, $6.5 million against the cap, and they've got some money to spend now, but who's going to take the load off of Edelman? If Harry can't produce in his second year, you're down to like Damier Byrd and Gunner. What's going to happen? Do they go out and get a receiver?
Yeah,
Harry has to step up, doesn't he? I mean,
yeah. If those things don't happen, if Harry doesn't step up, and you are looking at Damier Byrd, who had a really good training camp and had a previous relationship with Cam. He played down in Carolina with him for a couple of years. And I think he's one of those guys that can play inside and outside. Now, he hasn't had a ton of snaps, but he is coming off his best season with the Cardinals. So, they're counting on him. They're counting on Gunner making a big leap. And I think he got a lot of the reps, first team reps this summer. He was banged up last week too, but they're hoping that a lot of these things work out. And then, I don't think that, because the Sanu trade didn't work out, I don't think that would make them gun shy of going out and getting another receiver if they thought. I mean, the same people that were, kind of crying about the Sanu trade weren't working out every one of those people wanted that Sanu trade last year when they made that trade. So it's not like you can look at it and say, well, they shouldn't have made that trade. At the time, that was the trade to make. Brady needed another weapon. He looked like he was going to be the guy, especially in that Baltimore game where he had 10 catches. And then the next week, he got hurt and he was never the same guy again. So, the trade didn't work out, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that said at the time you shouldn't make that trade.
I was all for the trade. I'm just surprised that maybe they cut him instead of trying to find a way to make it work this year. I understand he probably didn't have a very good camp and he was looking slow. I guess I'm surprised that there was not a pay cut. Instead, they just cut him outright. I mean, they could have easily done the Danny Amendola thing and tried to find a way to bring him back, but they just decided that they didn't want him anymore. So we
don't know that didn't happen though. Maybe they did go to him and say, "Do you want to take a pay cut?" And he said,
You're right. We don't know for sure, but you would think that Sanu would realize. I mean, $3.5 million is better than nothing, which he's unsigned right now. So, I was
could have had him in.
I don't know if there's any magic answer at receiver, but I think James White's going to catch like 90 balls this year. He's just going to get fed a ton. Rex Burkhead, if he can stay healthy, is dynamic in the passing game. And I've heard good things about Devin Asiasi, the kid out of UCLA. Jed Fish, the quarterback's coach, knows him from college. I've heard he has potential to be a pretty solid pass catcher right away. So he is someone I'm looking forward to. Tight end's a hard position to come in right away and have a big impact, but he's someone I'm looking forward to maybe have a pretty solid rookie season.
Yeah, one drop last year as his last year at UCLA. One drop pass, so that's pretty encouraging. And I think going back to Damian Harris, he's a guy that played a little bit of slot at Alabama. So he's a receiver too. So they've got a lot of backs that are versatile. They've got White and Burkhead and Harris. Those guys can catch the ball too. So, those backs are going to catch the ball a lot.
Getting a lot of questions.
It's been an ongoing theme, hasn't it? The revolving door. I mean, we don't need to go back through all the Josh Gordon, right, and Antonio Browns. I mean, it's not a new thing for the Patriot fans. So if some of those, like using the guys more out of the backfield, I think that's some of the answers they're going to have to try this year.
1 year ago this week, the Patriots' top three receivers were Edelman, Josh Gordon, and Antonio Brown. So how things change.
It's great.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. That's not exactly Damier Byrd and Gunner and who else?
It was the greatest year ever in the draft for receiver, and there were all these guys available in free agency, and they didn't go for any of them. They went for Damier Byrd. It really feels like a rebuilding year where they just didn't want to spend on free agents other than McCourty and Joe Thuney as kind of their locker.
And Ben, that's why, like with Sanu, like what you said it earlier, with waiting on Cam, it's about value, right? And I just think when Bill saw what little, I guess, he was going to get from Sanu for the amount he was going to pay him, it just, the value, better to get rid of it now and just, it just wasn't worth, to him, at least that's how I would look at it. He just didn't see the value in keeping him, he wasn't going to get enough for his money in that.
He's not afraid to admit a mistake, Belichick. I mean, if the guy doesn't work out, he cuts him.
Same with the kicker in the 5th round.
Right. Well, we're getting a lot of questions about that, Ben, and people are concerned that they don't have a kicker. I mean, we expect Folk to be the kicker, right?
Yeah, I'd be shocked if it's not him. I think they're just using the roster spot for some tinkering to claim guys and put guys in IR and hide their intentions a little bit. So I think it's just roster games from Belichick. And I think they'll keep Folk around, but, he's an older veteran. They don't know how exactly he's going to hold up. And so they can keep Rohrwasser on ice. And I was told from someone close to Rohrwasser that he's finally healthy, that he was dealing with an injury early in camp, but he's feeling good now. So maybe he ends up kicking later this year.
Yeah. You certainly saw the signs that he was hurt because he just wasn't smooth kicking. He didn't have that, free and easy leg. It always looked like he was kind of pulling things, and he just looked like a guy that wasn't healthy. So, he definitely was battling.
It's interesting, Scott, for all the continuity at quarterback, which of course we know. I think, and it's undersold because it's kicker and it's special teams, and you don't really appreciate a kicker till you don't have one, right? But the stability the Patriots have had at that position for the duration of Belichick's tenure is impressive, and it's certainly something that I think goes unnoticed sometimes, that or just underappreciated, and it's why it's almost like you can sense a panic sometimes among fans, like, oh my God, who's going to kick? It's not a situation they found themselves in very often.
Yeah, the two leading scorers in franchise history,
Yeah.
Vinatieri and Gostowski and Vinatieri. So.
Yeah, I mean that's two pretty good picks right there. And
All right, I want to change gears here just real quickly. So I want to get to Brady for a minute. So in the battle of the revenge tours between Cam Newton and Tom Brady, and you can probably put Belichick in that category too. All right, Ben, who has the better year, Brady or Cam?
Brady. I think Brady's going to have a bounce back year. I think he's got 4,000 yards in him. I think 10 plus wins. I'm a little curious to see how it all meshes because we all remember, especially last year, how difficult it was for Brady to work with some new receivers sometimes. And other than Gronk, it's all new receivers. I think anyone can throw to Mike Evans, but like Chris Godwin, he put up a lot of numbers with Jameis last year. But is he going to be, right on point, 18 yards, down the field on the spot that he needs to be? Is Brady going to trust him? Same with O.J. Howard and all the other weapons they have there in Tampa now. So I'm a little curious. It looks great on paper, but is Brady going to make it all, work together seamlessly? So I do think Brady has a bounce back year, but I'm not, it's not going to be like 13-3. I think they're looking more at like 10-6.
I'm going to take a contrarian point of view and say Newton has the better year because I think that the division, the NFC South, is monstrous. I think the Saints are really good. I think the Panthers are okay, but I think the Falcons are really good and underrated. So I think that Brady's got a tougher schedule than the Patriots do.
The Patriots literally have the toughest schedule in the NFL, Jim.
Division-wise.
Yeah, but overall, the Patriots go to Seattle, they go to Kansas City, they go to Houston, the 2 games in LA, they go down to Miami.
Ben, if I agreed with you, do you know how I'd get murdered out there? No thanks.
All right, Tara, the tie here.
I have to break the tie. Oh boy, I think I'm going Brady for the better year. I think though it hinges for me. It's not even so much about the weapons he has, which are clearly better than what Cam has. It's the protection. I mean, to me, like, Brady looked his best when he had time last year, and he was a little slower, maybe just, I don't know, getting to the mark or whatever. So if he has time and he feels safe, I think he's going to have the better year. I think they probably just have more weapons and better all around. But I don't know. It's a toss up. That's a tough one to determine.
I mean, I think he's never had a cast of characters like Ben says, like he has now. Those 2 guys on the outside, he's got a security blanket in Gronkowski. If O.J. Howard has a bounce back year, I just think he's going to put up eye-popping numbers. He's got something to prove too. He really is. It seems to be,
but he's still
hell-bent on putting up numbers.
And Brady gets games in domes this year, like in New Orleans and Atlanta. He gets warm weather home games. So I can't wait for Sunday. I can't wait to see this Saints-Bucks game on Sunday.
He also has secondaries that he can pass on, Ben, too. You can pass on the Saints. You can pass on the Falcons. So
I was supposed to be at this game in New Orleans on Sunday. I am really bummed out, man.
I know. It's all different. We'll make the best of it, Benny. We'll make the best of it.
All right. So we got to talk about records here. Caesars has the Patriots. The over-under is 9, along with the Bills. Now, do any of you, have faith in the Bills that the Bills can actually win this division?
I mean, they could, but I think they're going to take a slide. I think they're going to slide back this year because I just don't believe in Josh Allen. And I think they won 10 games in spite of him last year. And their schedule, like the Patriots, is going to be very difficult this year. So I think the Patriots, this is one of these years where they could win the division at like 9-7. So that's kind of what I have right now.
Wow, 9-7 wins the AFC East.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think 10-6, but I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm agreeing with everything Ben thinks about the Bills and Josh.
I picked the Bills to win the division, so I don't see it. I think their defense is good enough. I had 8-8 for the Patriots.
You did. I have no confidence in the Bills. They've never won anything.
People are sleeping on the Dolphins. The Dolphins are the team to watch, I think, in the AFC East right now.
All right. I mean, how can the Patriots not win 10 games, really, when you think about it? I mean,
well, Ben just said they got lots of miles to log.
Their schedule is brutal.
Yeah, the beginning.
The early season schedule is very tough. They really need to survive early, and they'll always play better in November and December. Those teams will always be better. as they go
I mean, they
along.
didn't last year, though. They certainly didn't last year. I was looking at their schedule today, and I think they'll mostly hold serve at home. The only really tough games at home are San Fran and Baltimore, at least on paper. And I think they can go 6-2, 7-1 at home. It's the road where they've got to win 2 or 3 games on the road, and all of their road games are difficult this year. So that's what's tricky. It's just their road schedule is brutal.
So Ben, but we were talking earlier, at Seattle, at Kansas City, those aren't as difficult, with no fans in the stands as it might have been.
Right. They catch some of a break because they go to Kansas City and Seattle, the 2 loudest stadiums, and there won't be fans there, or not many. So they do catch a break there. But you could play Kansas City on the moon and it'd be a tough game. And same with Seattle. I mean, you still got to fly 3,000 miles and just deal with the hassle of traveling, and then deal with Russell Wilson and a pretty good defense out there. So, they go down to Houston. Houston should be a pretty tough game this year. Miami's never a treat. Even the 2 division games at Buffalo, at the Jets, those aren't going to be cakewalks. So I just think it's a very, very difficult road schedule.
All right. And Tara,
a week in Los Angeles too.
Yeah.
Would they stay out there? Is that what their plans are? Or do you know, Jim?
I don't know, but I would think that if they get league approval, they would, because it's not even a Sunday, it's a Sunday, Thursday. So to have to travel back,
yeah, that makes no
that
sense.
would be brutal and unfair, really.
Yeah.
All right. As we're wrapping up here, one more prediction I want to get from each of you too. We know that we saw what the NBA players did, taking a stand against racism by sporting their social justice messages on the backs of their jerseys. And Roger Goodell has certainly softened his stance towards social justice issues in recent months, saying he should have listened to Colin Kaepernick more. Does Brady take a knee in week 1?
Brady, no chance.
I say no.
No
I
chance.
don't think so. No.
No way. Brady, a lot of players will. And it sounds like even the Dallas Cowboy players will, because everyone's kind of looking at that. I don't see any way because Brady just doesn't want to tick off people. So the safest route is just to do nothing,
Even though he's on the other sideline from Drew Brees, and Drew Brees will.
It's different situations. Drew Brees.
Yeah, Drew Brees put himself in that situation by what he said. So I feel like he's doing something in response to his own, to sort of say, to prove solidarity in a way. I just would be surprised. Brady he just has not taken public stances in that manner, way, shape, or form in any way. Now, you could argue it was a function of being in New England, where, the players are less inclined to do that, I guess, but I would be really shocked. I don't see it.
I could see Tom, putting his hand on the shoulder of a teammate that's kneeling, but I don't think he takes it himself.
And Tara, where do you think having, the names of victims on the back of their helmets will play with the fans? Where does this leave the game with its relationship with the fans? Is there risk of manipulation?
I think the NFL has come, forward in a lot of ways in trying to allow their players to have the voices. But as I've written before, it's always a complicated, thin tightrope, because there are fans who are going to be alienated by it, and there are, and there are players who are going to be upset if they feel restricted from doing it. I do think it's that third rail of watching sports in today's, in today's climate under any circumstance, and where if you focus on the activism and the social justice, you turn off the fans who only want that escape in sports. And if you only focus on the sports, you do a disservice to all this great work and causes that these players believe in. And I feel fiercely that these players should be able to express rights and say that. I just don't think it harms anything. And I think they are multidimensional people and they have the platform. I don't, the notion that you can't mix sports and politics, I just think that train has left the station. So, it's one of those complicated things, and the NFL, I just think it's going to be one we're watching all the time to see it, how much politics plays in or doesn't this season.
My read on that, Scotty, is not to be too cynical, but I think the owners and Roger Goodell saw in 2017 and 2018 when they kind of went to battle with President Trump and the conservative media, that there was a lot of outrage and a lot of chatter about it, but ultimately it didn't really affect the ratings and it didn't affect the league's business that much. So I don't think they're afraid of that anymore. I think they know that there's going to be a lot of dissent and chatter from the conservative media and from Donald Trump. They're going to draw their ire, but I don't think they really care about that anymore because I don't think they see it as materially affecting what they do.
Jimmy, last word?
I'd be interested to see what the demonstrations will be, but I have no, guess as to what it will be. It'll just be, it'll be interesting.
All right. All right. Well, you guys, this has been great. And I want to thank you all for joining us. This has been a terrific hour. We've really enjoyed doing this and having you listen in and firing questions at us. So keep it on bostonglobe.com all season long. And maybe we'll circle back mid-season and do this again. And let us know what else you'd like to see us cover in this forum, because we certainly had a lot of fun doing this. So have a good night, everybody.